there's been a lot of times where I'm laying on the bathroom floor looking for a vein and just crying after I've just, like stabbed myself. Just so it's easy to forget that. But just like you, I lived in that for a solid decade.
Yeah. This is the I Am Redemption podcast, and today I would like to introduce a very special guest. He's one of my best friends in the world, Lance Risher. Lance and I got tight we met right before quarantine, or right as quarantine was happening.
Yep.
And, I think we would both say neither he nor I are the type of people just to reach out to some perfect stranger that we have no idea who is. I think Lance had saw something about me on social media or online and took the leap and reached out. And so it was quarantine. Everybody was scared to come out of the house. And so he and I ended up meeting. We sat down and we thought it was going to be a quick little 15, 20-minute conversation. I think 3 hours passed, and at the end we were both like, let's go. What are we doing? And so we've been riding tight ever since. So I'd like to introduce my boy Lance. Lance, you want to introduce yourself? Tell him a little bit about you?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, man, I'm really happy to be here. Sorry it took so long, but we're here.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying, now that that's not my character at all. Like, I'm the biggest, like, I'll mind my business, you mind yours type person when it comes to, like, meeting new people.
Right.
So, yeah, it was really, I guess, serendipitous that sitting around bored and just a friend of a friend is like, oh, have you seen this dude? Like, no, I haven't, but now I want to meet him. And so, yeah, I think I slid in the DMs and we met at Town Lake and yeah, not what I was expecting, but, through all that, like, we're sitting here.
Yeah. I was just happy that somebody else was brave enough to reach out, and when everybody's sitting at home scared, and I was like, we're going to be outside, we're good.
Yeah. And I'm glad, you were part of that. I figured you might be just based on, like, the pretense, but yeah, we found each other at a good time.
Yeah, for sure.
So
not too many people, dude, stories within the recovery community or just life in general raise my eyebrow, you know what I mean? I think both of us, we've heard it all before, but I remember meeting you and some of the stories I started hearing, and I just remember being like, yeah, there's no way. And then I would come to find out, yeah, there was a definite way. You've had a wild journey, dude, and it's been a blessing on my end to be part of that journey somewhat here towards your latter years with it and everything like that. But do you want to give everyone some context to where it all started?
Yeah. So I'll just start from the beginning. So I'm from Mississippi, for better or worse. It's the typical, like, I guess typical to you and me, like, sad story, like, oh, family wasn't, together, like, grew up poor. So yes, all that's a part of it. I think, so I usually tell people, like, there's, like, are you born an addict or do you become an addict, like that kind of thing. In hindsight, I was an addict as far as behaviors, like, way, way before I ever, took a drink or, like, put a needle in my arm. Just as a kid, I was in and out of the hospital. I was the kid that's, like, setting stuff on fire or, like, jumping off the roof. And there, still to this day, there's just this innate thing where, like, of course, like, I'm aware that the stove is hot and you're telling me, but I'm still going to touch it. Not necessarily to find out, but just, like, it touches that thing in me, So in hindsight, it was natural, like, there is the nature versus nurture, like some tough situations, just life shit, that further steered me probably down a darker path once it got started. But yeah, man, I mean, as far as that part of stuff, I started early. Dad, much like yours, like, mom and dad split up when I was probably 2. Some different stepdads, stepmoms in the mix. And my dad, he, till this day, like, he drinks, he's an alcoholic. So as far as drinking, I probably drank my first beer when I was like 5 years old, you know, just as I'm like, oh, it's funny that the little kid's drunk.
Right.
But, you know, learning what I've learned and like same you learned, that's not healthy. It's not normal. But it was, that's how it happened for me. You know, I had a period of like single digit childhood age where like, I wouldn't say shit was like stable, but it was good, you know, for, we'll say like 5 to 10 maybe. Things were seemingly normal. But then, of course, like between different like family stuff and, you know, the nature I just told you I kind of like have in me, I always wanted to push the boundary, which naturally when you're coming up in like some sketchy friend zones and like stuff like that, drugs, alcohol, that's the natural progression, unfortunately. But, you know, that's just the real of it. So, yeah, I mean, 12, 13 was when I was like becoming like a drinker. I probably experienced like my first alcoholic withdrawals at like 15. You know, where I'm like drinking, going to school. Of course, there's like smoking pot, all that stuff. But like, you know, the stupidest way it could have happened, not that this determined my fate, but probably steered me in a particular direction, was I was moving flower pots in my mom's backyard, and, you know, just there's 10 or 12 of them. They're huge. So in like the fourth or fifth one, I just kind of pick it up, back snaps, it's, you know, herniated disc. And so I get put on, this is prime opiate epidemic, like it's happening, but no one knows it's happening, so it's a free-for-all. I got put on 180 30 milligram Oxycontin as a 15-year-old. So shame on the doctors, but like at the same time, like I had or should have had like some, you know, guidance that that's not the move. But I would argue that I had kind of like an affirmation that was the move. You know,
the doctor gave me, it's okay.
Yeah, for sure. And then you throw in like the, you know, the family dynamic that I was living under. It wasn't. I always put it in context for myself and for other people when I'm like talking about it. I use my nephew as an example. He's in that like 15, 16, you know, kind of age, and he's like the most sweet, innocent, makes good grades, like does what he's supposed to. And I think about like the fucked off things I was doing.
At 15.
Yeah, well, at 15, and then like a professional giving him like a handful of Oxycontin.
Right.
Like, this will make your life better.
Right.
Like, you know, it's knowing what we know today, like in general, like the general public, like that's, of course, that's not,
Right.
you know.
Let me ask you real quick, if we could. So what you said about, you know, I don't know if you feel the same way. I feel our stories align in so many areas. For me, you know, I grew up and I looked at my dad like he was Superman. He was in good shape. He worked hard, but he doesn't have the same same addict gene that I do. You know, I mean, he does, but I grew up idolizing him and I watched him party hard. You know what I mean? And so it only glorified that to me. And then like you're saying, how your drug stuff escalated so quickly. You know, I think you and I are in the same, when like there was, as soon as I would do this drug that was made out to, you know, weed or alcohol that was made out to be so bad to me, and I did it and it was just like, that's it? All right, what's next? And it just like shot me up the ladder. And then, you know, I got in a car accident and they put me on Oxycontin just like you, and I'm 16 years old and stuff like that. And so I feel like, how could you not take all those aspects of either of our stories and throw them in there, and like, how could it not end up where it did? You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
well, we didn't have a chance on paper. You know, and you know, it's a weird thing. So like, does someone with like a perfectly healthy family structure that was different from ours, like, kid's got a lawyer and a doctor for mom and dad. Like, does it play out the same if you feed that kid the same OxyContin? Well, like, no, because it would stand to reason, like, if the family is healthy, that's never going to be an option on the family side of things. So yes, like, whatever, the things that were going on with Big Pharma or whatever at that particular, like, era, this would have been, like, early 2000s. Sure, like I said, shame on them. But there's so many fail-safes between how's a 15-year-old without a car getting to the doctor?
Yeah.
How's he getting to the pharmacy? So yeah, it's we didn't stand a chance. But at the same time, like, there was no part of me that had any.
Right, me neither.
Yeah.
Right when you just said how are you getting to the pharmacy or the doctor, I was like, well, there's a
Yeah,
way, dude.
walking
Right.
if I need to.
Right.
So yeah, it's tough. Like, everything that I went through, and we've talked about this a million times. Like, you got to go through those things to be who you are. Like, I love, like, who I am as far as, like, understanding a bunch of just, like, the shitty parts of life. Like, ignorance is bliss, but I think we're, like, especially qualified for what we do. But just as, like, having a realistic look at the world, you got to go through some shit. And so I don't, at no point was, like, any of the stuff that happened enjoyable, but it's like, that's my arsenal of knowledge, lived experience, like, hard times. Hard times make tough people, that whole deal. So I can say that being on the other side of it. But there's been a lot of times where I'm laying on a bathroom floor looking for a vein and just crying after I've just, like, stabbed myself. Just so it's easy to forget that. But just like you, I lived in that for a solid decade.
Yeah.
And, can't have one without the other. Yeah, to answer your question, like, we were set up, to a degree, to go exactly where we went. But, at present day, like, that's the biggest blessing that we did do that.
Dude, I just heard Mike Tyson say this quote, and it's, without the test, there is no testimony.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't hear many quotes that jump out to me, but that one is like, man, that couldn't be truer.
Yeah.
How are you going to give a testimony if you haven't been through some shit?
Well, and, we talk about it, I think, just to give some insight into one of our private conversations, it's not crazy, but you were asking me, I think it was about, like, working with interventionists and stuff. And, of course, as a good person that wants to help people, when it came to, like, how do I, like, charge for these services or whatever, I'm like, well, you don't go to the doctor and, like, they give you that bill, you're like, oh, I got to pay this. Like, this, well-educated, like, person has done this for me. I'm like, bro, you earn your pay or your compensation for that same scenario of laying in the bathroom.
Right.
And that's our credentialing.
Yeah, that's our education.
I would do med school 100 times over to skip out on any 6-month period of some of the torture that, like, we've endured.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's our schooling. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's just how it played out for us. But, like, I'm 100% proud of that.
Right. And I just don't want it to get twisted. And nothing here are we saying poor us or poor me.
Yeah, I don't like that connotation at all. But I do think you have to know, like, that part of it to realize, like, what we're doing sitting here in a fancy studio, like, talking about this stuff. It only makes sense, like, the comeback of it, if you know, like, where it came from.
Right.
But yeah, no, in fact, I would say, like, that was one of the biggest things that helped me get well, was dropping the poor me shit. Like, someone's always got it worse, not to, like, dull down how bad my shit is, But we at some point you can't live in that.
Right.
I never got better by telling someone how I'd been wronged, or like, look at these odds that were stacked against me, and they're like, perfect, that's what's going to get you better. Just live in that place of pity and sorrow for yourself.
Right.
Like that was, in fact, the opposite was true. Like, you got to get rid of that shit. Like, yeah, that happened, but what are you going to do now? So yeah, definitely not a poor me.
Right. So, dude, you've told me 100 different crazy stories. There's a couple just to help better paint the picture for anybody listening. I don't know which one came first. Do you know the two stories I'm talking about?
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. If you wouldn't mind elaborating on those a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think, when you and I are telling them, it's funny to us because we're, it's just like a war story. It's, just we're talking shit about how crazy that was. But I think for people that aren't familiar with, like, the severity of addiction and, like, how much it has a hold on you, those same stories that we laugh at could give some real insight to people. Like, when the mom that can't understand why her son just, like, can't get sober, or you've been locked up 10 times, like, why do you keep doing the things that are getting you locked up? Or the mom that, can't get her kids back from CPS because of it. This might give some framework for exactly the nature of the beast that we're dealing with, that they're dealing with. So one of them, just to provide context for this one, when I went to college up at Ole Miss, my mom, she got remarried like my senior year or something for a second time, and she moved to Houston briefly. Then his job took them overseas to a combination of Australia and Singapore. But in total, they were out of the States for about 10 years, so I was just kind of out here doing what I do. And so she would do these periodic, like, come back for Christmas and maybe stay for like a month, just because it's such a long flight. She would want to spend some time. So she did the typical mom stuff, like, does your car need an oil change? Like, have you been to the dentist lately? That kind of stuff. So we'd go down our checklist, which an offshoot of that is she did send me to the dentist and I needed my wisdom teeth out. And I told the doctor I told my mom I was on Suboxone, which she relayed to the dentist, and I wasn't. And I was basically just shooting dope, whatever. But because of the pretense of that was my story for her to, like, think I was, like, doing something about my drug addiction, I got my 4 wisdom teeth cut out while awake with no pain medication, because he said the pain medication wouldn't work because of the Suboxone. So yeah, I just sat in a chair like this and just got my teeth cut out. But I knew I was getting Percocet after anyway, so it's like, whatever. That wasn't even the story I was getting to.
Right. That was a good build up to it, though.
Yeah. So to go along with that, you know how it is. Like, you wake up in the morning, you're either feeling sick or waiting to start feeling sick. Mm-hmm. So my first waking thought is like, all right, let me throw the text out. Let me make some calls. Like, how am I getting money today? So that's how every day starts.
Just to give some brief context, when you're on opiates, you can only go so long without them. So once you've gone to bed and slept 6-8 hours or whatever, usually by the time you're waking up, you're already deathly ill, and the first thing you need to do is get right. Right.
And beyond that, you just at a very core level want to get high too. Yeah.
For sure.
So there's a routine that, you build around that, like, which gas station you're meeting homeboy at, like, the playbook for the day. So in these periods where my mom would come back from overseas, like, that would totally disrupt that flow. So it was like, maybe when she says she's going to see her friend, I can sneak over, get this, and, like, get enough to, like, I don't have to, because it's very apparent to a normal person, like, why are you going to the gas station 12 times in a 4-hour period?
Right.
And so because of that, what you just alluded to is like inevitably like that's disrupted, the schedule of it. I start getting sick. I don't want to out myself as like what's really going on, which is me shooting heroin. So there's like a survival mechanism built in. If I can keep people from knowing this about me, I can take care of it, and nobody will be any the wiser.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just magically have the strength to not shoot heroin. Nobody will ever know what was going on, and we're all good. So as a part of keeping up that kind of ruse, I would always feign these like stomach pains, which I was having stomach pains, but I was attributing that to some phantom GI thing I was suffering from. So of course, mom being mom, like, well, we got to get that checked out, So I go through all the motions. I get the colonoscopy, endoscopies, barium enema. They're doing all these tests, and they're like, we can't find anything. Me knowing, like, well, yeah, there's nothing wrong. I'm just dope sick.
Right. But you're keeping the lie going.
Oh, no, I'm committed,
Right.
fully committed. So I take it to such a place that they're like, apparently when they can't find stuff like that, a common thing is that your gallbladder. You don't necessarily need your gallbladder. So I'm like, so they're like, we think like taking out your gallbladder is probably the move since these 7 tests, we can't find anything. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's probably what it is. I'm not a doctor, but I trust you. And so, yeah, I just went through, I had a surgery, and got my gallbladder removed, all to not, because me admitting to what the real reason was, steps come after that where like I get sober, at this point, like I don't have much to hang on to except getting high. So yeah, in my mind, if I keep the ruse going, I get to keep getting high, and that keeps me in my delusion of like I'm going to take care of this at some point. But yeah, I had an organ removed on behalf of not giving up on that, and they wheel you out when you've had anesthesia or whatever. And so I had driven myself to the hospital, and they wheel you out, sit you on the curb while your ride pulls up. I just told them that someone was pulling the car around, and as soon as I went back in, I just walked to my car and just drove, like still spun out on like the anesthesia and stuff, because I had a 30-count script of Percocet burning a hole in my pocket that they had sent me out with. I went directly to the CVS a couple miles away, and they filled them right there on the spot. They'd been like called in, and I just ate the whole bottle of on the spot, because that's not holding a candle to my normal intake. And yeah, all for the purpose of like that was my cookie, was like, because I was so good at keeping up this scam, like I get this treat of a free bottle of Percocet. And yeah, I acquired like $70,000 worth of medical bills doing that, just for the sake of like, well, still get to get high,
That's commitment right there. You told me that story originally, and that was wild. Like, I'm all for going in and feeding a lot of shit to the doctor to get what I need and everything. But if they're going to talk about cutting out my gallbladder, I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah, I've got 7 incision marks across my abdomen because of it. So.
And I think, there's probably some people listening or watching this right now that are wondering how you or I could laugh at it. But, and I remember the first time my lovely wife hung around you and I were going back and forth on some of our stories, and she was kind of mortified because she doesn't come from the recovery community or the real world.
Right.
And I remember you left, and she asked me, she's like, well, how can you laugh about like such of these tragic things that have happened to you in your life and all this pain? And I was like, how else are you going to deal with it? Like,
yeah, it's like just the inverse for me. It's like, how can you not?
Right.
And
I think it comes from knowing where, both you and I are in such different places today to look back, and it's almost like laughing. It's like, that wasn't me.
Oh, I fully feel like I just told you that story about somebody else. Sure, I mean, other than like my stomach being the one with cuts on it, like it doesn't even make sense to me. And it's a dual thing, because when I'm like telling stuff like that, on one hand, I feel like that stuff was happening 6 months ago, and like I was in it. And on the other hand, it seems like I'm just like telling somebody else's story, which, you know, I think that's the healthy balance. Like, I need to know that's real for me, because like if not, like I'll be high tomorrow.
Right.
As soon as I think like I've got it completely under control, that's when like the ego kicks in, and it's like, well, like, you know, yeah, I was an alcoholic at one point, but I never really drank when I was shooting heroin, so I could probably like drink.
Right.
You know, I'm older, I'm wiser. But yeah, that shit's not real. That's just the same thing that kept us high for a decade. It's like, hey man, still here. If you ever want to come say what's up, you know. But yeah, you have to know it's still real for you. But you also like have to put some distance between like, that's some stuff I did and some stuff that happened to me, but that's not like who I am at a core level.
Right,
That's the worst version of me, with like a lot of, you know, shit that wasn't dealt with, combined with like arguably the most powerful substance on the world. Like, and you know, of course I'm gonna do some shit like that. With that combination.
Now the other story, the infamous picture. I hope there's a way.
I was gonna say, I wonder if we could like I'll send you the picture in case y'all can throw it up right here.
Hopefully we can show y'all this picture, because it is a legendary picture.
Yeah, so more of the same. So this was pretty close before I went to treatment. It was my second to last overdose before I got sober. And so the circumstances were kind of like, mom and stepdad had just come back from being overseas for 10 years. They were back in their house in Houston. And this is such a fast forward from, you know, me being 15 or whatever. But so basically I had spent years of couch surfing and bouncing around. Like, got kicked out of school, but like stayed another year there and was sleeping on my buddy's couch. Orlando, Memphis, Houston, back to Mississippi. Spent some time in Australia with them. But so this all is after that. They come back after that 10-year stretch, and my stepdad, he, you know, starts like feeling like I've got a kidney stone or a gallstone. So he goes to the doctor. It turns out to be bile duct cancer, which is pretty rare, but it's very aggressive. I guess maybe the bile ducts function is like filter stuff, bad stuff out of your body. But if that's cancerous, I think it kind of filtered the cancer to everything else. So like all of his organs got taken out. It was a very quick process. They got back from Singapore, moved in. He went to the hospital like 3 weeks after they moved back. 4 weeks after they told him what it was, he died. So it was very quick, you know, and he never got to see me be sober. And I was also very like, I was in Mississippi at the time, and just didn't have the capacity to be there for my sister, my mom, whatever. That just wasn't on my radar. But I came out to Houston. I was going to be there for my mom, which it started with, like, I got there after he died. I shot heroin in the funeral home at his ceremony. He got cremated, so, like, I'm in the bathroom fucking shooting dope. That's even that type of moment couldn't stop me from getting high. At that time, that's what helped me be the best current version of myself in that world I was living in. And then I got hip to the fact that he, like an absolute gangster, he was on hospice and refused all pain meds or anything that was gonna cloud his vision, because he knew, like, I'm out of here in like a week. So he's like, I want to be present for every moment I have left. And once again, like, that thing inside me is like, well, looks like they left this morphine that they were going to give him here. So, like, bed's still warm from, coroner coming and take him out, and I'm, like, rummaging through the vials of morphine that he was so much of a man he refused to take. So I stayed there for, like, 6 months, and, I eventually went to treatment from there because of what would happen, but overdosed once, up in the bathroom. Then, like, my overdoses kept getting closer and closer, and I was probably like 5 years deep in, like, speedballs, which for everybody out there, that's mixing cocaine and heroin, and it was leading to me having a lot of seizures, which is another ruse I played up. I got diagnosed as epileptic when it was just cocaine-induced seizures, to the point where I was doing sleep studies and, like, had electrodes on my head that I was, like, keeping on for a week. And of course, like, if you're shooting heroin and coke all day, you have the most chaotic brain waves throughout the course of a day. And they're like, you are the most epileptic person we've ever seen. This is insane. Like, yeah, I definitely am. And I was taking seizure meds, but it was just me shooting coke and falling out. But still, it's like, well, this preserves my ability to keep getting high. So within that, I was in a place of, when I'm, like, getting a shot of whatever together, of just kind of eyeballing it, like, man, this seems like too much, but, like, if it is, and, like, this is what takes me out, like, it's not the worst thing that could happen. Like, I'm living in the worst thing that could happen.
Right.
So I was pretty committed to, like, not, like, suicidal, but, like, very okay with dying. And so I even had a ritual, like, as soon as I get the plunger down, I would kind of get rid of the evidence. My parting gift was going to be that, like, when or if I die from this, at least I've saved my mom or whoever that finds me, like, the mental image of the needle still being in my arm. That was the best thing I was capable of leaving to the world, essentially. So on one of these given instances, I had a bunch of cocaine, and I was already, like, in a psychosis, but sitting down on the bathroom floor up against the door after I had locked and unlocked it 10 times because I'm just tweaked out. And so I've got this thing in my arm, and I'm pushing it. I get about halfway down, and my brain's like, oh, I fucked up. Like, and by the time that thought occurs, I've pushed it the rest of the way down. And so I just, tunnel vision, like I'm looking through a toilet paper roll, basically. And it was different from, like, other experiences I had had. So I'm like, all right, maybe if I stand up, that'll help, like, circulate things. And I tried to stand up. Legs couldn't get underneath me. I fell into the shower, just banging around. And it was the most, like, just a complete loss of motor control. I couldn't get my hands or arms to do anything. And I was laying face down, and I've made such a commotion at this point that, my mom can hear me downstairs banging around, things are falling. And I'd locked the door, so they're trying to beat in the door. And I had turned myself around. It's probably like a 6-7 foot distance from, like, the tub to the door. And I'm just laying there, just, like, brain is hyperactive. Like, I can completely digest what's happening, but I can't do anything about it. And so I'm basically using my big toes and, like, my chin to kind of inchworm. Like, I'm pulling myself towards the door, and, like, they're screaming, like, unlock the door, unlock the door. And I just...
This is like some Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas shit right now.
Yeah, well, that's what it was it kind of felt like it. At a certain point, I was like watching this happen. This was like something I was watching. Even though it was me, I was just trapped inside of myself. And so, basically, fast forward, they bust the door down, they get me out. And I was in full-blown tachycardia, which is like a super elevated heart rate, but it was like super extreme. And so my heart rate got up to like 270. My blood pressure when they took it, which is 20 minutes after this all happened and the paramedics got there, it was at like 250 over 190, which a couple things are going to happen. Your heart's going to explode. You're going to have an aneurysm. It's like which one's going to happen first kind of thing. So because of my blood pressure, my heart rate, I had started bleeding out of my eyeballs. And you've seen the picture. I'm literally, it's exactly what you think. Like there's just tears of blood coming out of my eye sockets because it just can't go anywhere. So they go in my neck, give me what I can presume is like a tranquilizer of some sort to just plummet my heart rate. And this is, so that's wild enough, but this is the follow-up to what we were talking about earlier. Like, I will do anything to get high. I will steal from you. I will steal from everyone you love. Like, I'll do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm in the emergency room and still keeping up the ruse of like, oh, crazy seizure back there, huh? You know, and it's just like I'm the only one who believes my shit at this point.
Right.
But, you know, they come in, they want to give me like a urine test and stuff. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll get that to you. My wheels are always turning on how to preserve this. And so I take it in the bathroom, I stomp violently on that pee cup, and I get all the shards together. I pull the bag out of the little small trash can, I put it under it, and put the bag back in. I come back, and the nurse, of course, comes back. Oh, did you get that urine sample for me? I'm like, oh, yeah, I gave it to the other nurse. And she was like, what other nurse? I was like, the one that came by and got it. What do you mean? And it like got an attitude, like, I'm not peeing again, you know?
Right.
So they didn't have any documentation of what was in my system, you know, and I got out. My mom was there with me the whole time. So this is where the sickness of it is, because I got to such a place where it would take me 30 or 45 minutes to like find somewhere I could like get a
Right.
vein. And so I had done that whole process prior to like shooting the coke that got me to the hospital. And so, like I said, they had to go in my neck here to like give me the whatever to bring my heart rate down. So I remember walking out of the ER and I was genuinely excited that they had left that there, because I'm like, oh man, when I get back to the house.
Now they gave you a roadmap.
Yeah, they've already X-marked the spot for me. Like if they could find it with a butterfly, like I'm good.
Yeah.
And I just proceeded to get just as high as I just did. Nothing about that pumped the brakes for me.
Right.
And then, you know, after that, like I overdosed one more time about a month later, and that's when I finally asked for help. Just as clear as it was coming out of the hospital the time before that I was not going to do anything other than get high again, it was just that clear that like, man, you're dying. And like, you got to do something different. And I asked for help as soon as like I woke up in the hospital from that last time. But yeah, we've got a million of those.
Yeah.
I don't want to like completely, you know, it won't translate for some people watching, but like, once again, for those people, that's more to explain like the what you're up against as a family member. If you're just like, why can't I just like tell you to get better? Like
Right.
That's what you're up against.
Yeah, dude, that definitely paints a picture. And you know, there's, you know, I've never been on the other side of it. I mean, obviously we work with people.
Right.
I've only been the addict, but there's a reason they, you know, I hate quoting the big book, but no human power could relieve our sickness, dude. There's nothing. My mom, my sister, you know, nobody. It's gotta come from me. And everybody has their rock bottom moment where they feel it's like, I can't do this anymore, or I am gonna die, or whatever like that. I wanted you to tell those stories just to be able to paint that picture, but I didn't want to. Is there anything else about your journey that I didn't want to skip over in the timeline? Is there anything that you feel has some substance that you wanted to talk about?
I mean, man, I think it's just anything that happened between, you know, that first beer at 5, 7, 8 years old, whatever it is, to that last overdose, it's all just part of the same storyline of like that thing that we got in us. That, I hate to say this, but like, people that see like addiction and stuff, they're like, drugs are the worst part of your life. There was a lot of times where, that's why I did drugs. They worked every time. So like when you're,
They were there for me when everybody else
yeah,
wasn't.
when it was like, somebody's walked out of my life in like a parental capacity, and I'm like a teenager and don't know which way's up. That's already a weird period. You're trying to figure out like which pocket of human am I going to lean into trying to be. And like being poor, like that adds another dynamic. Certain things that are at the forefront of like your daily maneuvering, other people might not realize is like something that even exists as a struggle.
Right.
So it's a whole like set of things that made the drug use like increase over time. But that's what I had at my disposal for a lot of those years, as far as like, how can I feel better? How can I be okay with like what's going on in my day to day? It was like feeling different. Like I want to change the way I feel. So yeah, they worked.
Yeah.
They worked so well that I was willing to have them kill me,
Right.
just because I knew they would work.
Right.
Which you don't really know when that tipping point is,
Mm-hmm.
when it goes from being fun and they work to this is like a situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like anybody else, there's a ton of different branches to the tree that is my less than orthodox childhood.
Right.
So yeah, I'm happy to talk about any of it.
So, we've heard, I don't want to say we've heard some of the bad, but we've heard some of the struggles and everything like that. We heard, you talked about your rock bottom moment of finally reaching out and needing help and everything. So to put it now take it towards a positive direction, what would you say, or do you have one that was like your moment of redemption? Your redemption moment where you looked around and you're like, oh, I'm fucking back. I've made it. I'm here.
Yeah, that's a weird one for me, because I think a lot of people have this saying or school of thought, like, I got to get sober and get to treatment so I can get my life back. I didn't have anything to get back, and whatever I might have had that existed from that prior life, like I didn't want back. Some very minimal, I guess you could say, good stuff, but like nothing worth like chasing and going back to. So I think I don't know if there was a moment where it was like, like, fuck yeah, I'm here, like I did it, I beat this thing. So in retrospect, if I was having like me currently try to pick out what that moment was, it would probably just be like laying in that hospital after the last overdose and like no one having to convince me or at this point, like the paramedics or whatever, they had handled my last few overdoses. So the sheriff's office in there, they're doing like this body diagram and like lifting my arms and my feet, like documenting all the track marks and stuff. And I'm looking at that. Mom's here crying once again, fresh off some Narcan. Like, I'm just looking at this like, bro, what are you doing? And for whatever reason, it was just like, bro, we doing this or what? Like, you ready to get sober? Or you committed to like just dying? Because it's coming.
Right.
So in hindsight, I guess that would be like my moment. Because that took more balls and like more just like everything in my life was built around the lies, the scams, the whatever got me to that point. I had to commit in that moment to just like shattering all that. We're starting fresh. And that was a bigger, like, I don't know, more respectable or difficult or however you want to categorize it, like moment in my life than anything I've done since.
Right.
There's cool stuff, like we've run our races, like those are huge accomplishments. Like I never did any of that before. Like being good to people, holding down like a good job, which I also get to like help people every day. Those are great, but like none of that happens without that moment. So I guess
that's good. That's good. Most people, myself included, would give some accolade that I've had in sobriety. You know what I mean? But to go and take it back to the root of where it all started, I like that a lot. And
I think I redeemed my former self with that.
And you brought up the races. I would, man, it's rare in life you come across somebody who's of such the same mindset as you and I think that's why we, that's why we got tight quick. But I met you, and you had just, I thought for sure you would run a half Iron. You did a half Ironman basically with a broken back after a very tragic car accident.
Right.
18-wheeler hit you, and you still went out and did it. And I remember you telling me that story when I first met you, and I was like, oh, this is my kind of dude right here. Like, by any means necessary, we're gonna get this shit done. And then I can just remember calling you, and there was never a time ever where you backed down from anything. Like, I don't even know that you were running much at that time, and I'm like, hey man, I'm gonna go run a 50K this weekend, you wanna go? You're like, yep, I'm in. And then, we ran our races and we went to our runs, and we would meet before work and go run hills in the midsummer heat of Texas and all that, and just you never blinked an eye. And then we got into the gym, and dude, there's not many human beings on this earth where we met every day for multiple years. 4 a.m. we work out. Sometimes we'd have a drive for work, so it's like, oh fuck it, let's meet at 3. And like, to your eye, like, we didn't blink an eye. We never bitch, complain, or anything like that. I was more excited for those workouts in that time than anything. Like, and it just felt so good to find somebody
same. I mean,
of like-mindedness.
Yeah, I mean, like I think our whole thing started off, with that meeting. And yes, same give and take from my side of things. I'm like, oh, this dude like does cool hard shit. Andy used to get down like I did. Perfect. Like, I didn't think there was many of us out there. So the, like always being willing to jump into something like that, like, hey, you want to go do a 50K? Of course. Are you in running shape? No, absolutely not. But like, I'm confident that like this is in shape, So there, it's
with the shit you've been before that.
Yeah, like this is fun.
50K in a weekend.
Yeah. Like pain, I'm familiar with. I've always had like a threshold for it. So yeah, there's of course like the ego part of like I want to do a challenging thing and do it well, and like want Shawn to see like I'm about it. But I came out of treatment and worked through treatment with this thing where like my best friend I grew up with, he had died from an overdose a couple weeks before I ended up going to treatment. And so I came in with like this reoccurring thing of like, who am I to not show up to that group, or who am I to not like go to this meeting with the kid at the sober house who doesn't have a car, and I do. So it's kind of like, it's like guilt tripping myself, but using it for a positive. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's some psychological stuff going on there, but it's like, who can't run a 50K is your boy Matt. Like, everybody else who's like didn't get as fortunate as we did in living long enough to get to treatment, it actually working. So there is a little bit of like chip on my shoulder of like I'm doing this for the ones that can't kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I use that to like 4 a.m. workout, like let's go. Yeah. And of course that's like the starting point, but yeah, I mean it evolved into like that's our medicine for the day. Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, we have the same philosophy. I think we look at it very similar and same philosophy. My boy Corey, who passed away, who they talk about in the documentary and stuff like that. Like, if I was honest and had to say that there's, higher power, if there's a heaven, if there's all that or whatever, like my chip on my shoulder was like, I feel like I failed him. So everything I do now is to show him that it wasn't for nothing, or that he could be proud of me or whatever like that. And so it's the same thing you're saying, is like, he can't, so I can, and so I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Same exact shit.
And I've got kind of a little metric, which there's no way to count it, but so I believe that my buddy Matt dying 2 weeks before my last overdose, that played a component when assessing myself in that hospital bed. And like, of course, like, your boy just died,
Yeah.
You're back here again. So in a lot of ways, I say that like his death helped get me to treatment. So now I also look at it like he wasn't just a dude that died from the same thing a bunch of other people have and are and will in the future die from. But he got me to treatment. So it's like every person that I help, stay sober, get to treatment, come back from a relapse, like, that's something he's done. I'm doing it like, as like the guy that's doing it, but I don't exist in that capacity without the pretense of like him being my guy. And I've talked to his mom about it and stuff, like, just know, like, his passing is not in vain. I will make sure of it. So yeah, that's another, like, I think a healthy chip on my shoulder.
Yeah. So through all your whole crazy journey, everything that's brought you here today, can you look back and what do you think the most valuable lesson that you've learned has been?
Oh man,
I'm sure there's a ton, but if you had the
Yeah.
first one that comes to mind.
I mean, just like, it sounds simple, but like, just show up. Like, guys that we used to work with, like, I would always tell them that, like, new in sobriety, showing up is probably 70-80% of this shit.
Yeah.
If you can show up on time to that thing, whether that leads to somebody respecting you more because, like, your punctuality, or you don't want to go to that recovery meeting, but you just show up, you might say or hear that one thing that either you or the next person need to hear in that very moment. A lot of stuff takes care of itself if you just show up and put your head down and do what needs to be done. That's a big question, so I don't want to dull it down too much, but I mean,
No, it's good.
It's been that simple for me.
Right.
And I've never had any like, man, am I doing the right thing? Do I really want to be sober? That stuff has never entered my mind just by showing up, just kind of blacking out and like, hey, this is the path I'm on clearly. So with what I do present day, what I've done in the past since getting sober, like it's all been kind of predicated on that.
Dude, and that's good advice for anybody. It doesn't matter if they're an addict or not.
Yeah.
That's for everybody that wakes up and their alarm goes off and they want to hit the snooze because they don't want to go to the gym.
Yeah.
They don't want to get up and go run. They don't want to do this. They don't want to go to work or whatever. If you just show up, man, like that's the hardest part, is just showing up.
Yeah, people see that, and it's just giving yourself more opportunity to like do the right thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, showing up to the gym, you're gonna get in better shape. Show up to work, your boss is gonna remember that you're the guy that shows up.
Right.
Whatever it is, showing up for
pay your bills.
Yeah, showing up for the kids' baseball game. I didn't have that, and I know how big like my dad or whoever not showing up. I see what that did as far as my lasting impression. So once again, in his case, had he just shown up,
Yeah.
we might be in a different place.
Dude, basketball was the biggest thing in the world to me growing up as a kid in grade school, high school, and my father had never, obviously he was in another state and stuff like that, but he never made the travel to see me play for a game. And so it was like everything, I'd go up and I'd visit him and I'd tell him all about it, but it like meant nothing because he never saw me play. You know what I mean? And I could say to a degree, like, I'm over it, but there's still a piece of me, that little hurt little kid. It's like, motherfucker, you never even
I had
seen me
this
play a game.
one very specific instance. I was so hype about it. So I was probably like 8, just doing the typical like Dizzy Dean or Little League baseball stuff. my dad made like a concerted effort to take me to the batting cages. They were like 30 minutes away in the next town. And so we just got down on some batting practice. He got me a new bat. And then I had a game coming up like 2 days later. And I would like to think because of the batting practice, like I get like, 2 triples and like an inside the park home run. I mean, we're 8, so whatever,
Right.
but that was a thing. Only to find out, like I was so hyped, like, hell yeah, Dad, like we got this done. Look what I did. Only to find out after that he like got called into work, couldn't come, and it's like, well, fuck me,
Right.
But there's plenty of those like little moments.
For
But
sure.
it is what it is.
So what would your advice be to somebody that's listening to this today? They've heard your story. It's hitting them in all the right places. What's your best advice for them?
It's tough. So the easy advice is like, man, if you're struggling, ask for help. There's a reason you hear that as advice, but like that's the only way it's going to get addressed. But at the same time, that comes along with like the help's not as valuable if you don't want it.
Right.
That's typically how it works. You got to be wanting the help, not just asking for it because like you think that's what you're supposed to do. But yeah, like don't stray away from having those like conversations of like, hey, this is what's going on. Like I need somebody to help me sort this out. I think getting like some form of like mentor in your life is important. So yeah, like having somebody that you can rely on, because we had a healthy absence of that, outside of your friends who were just as spun off as you were growing up. Like who did I have to go to?
Right.
Nobody with any good ideas. So I would just say like try to get some people around you that have your best interests and like you getting well like at the forefront, but don't be scared to ask for help.
Right.
Would probably be like the best advice I could give.
Yeah, I've said it before on other podcasts, but that would be my advice is being careful about who you choose to surround yourself with. Like, to think you're gonna surround yourself around with a bunch of drug addicts or a bunch of people breaking the law or a bunch of people just not living life the way you really want to live it, and you don't think you're gonna end up the same way.
You're gonna be the outlier in a group. Yeah.
My stepdad, again, I've said it before. My stepdad show me who your friends are, and I'll show you who you are.
Yeah.
And so. I always fancied myself as some leader, but all I know is every time I hung around people that did dope, I sure did dope.
Yeah.
So.
And to like the next level of that, I was in the age old like your mom asks you like if all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you jump off too? I'm like, nah, Mom, I'm the one choreographing the jump off the bridge.
Right.
So yeah, like maybe a better circle could have outweighed it, but at the same time, like. My friends were pretty split where it's like, there's 4 probably from my immediate, see them every day, come to the house after school that are dead, all from drug related stuff. And then there's a couple that like are still around and doing well. But yeah, it's very clear based on what you just said, like show me who your friends are and I'll show you who you are. Well, it's not by accident that I'm sober and almost died, and then 4 of those dudes are dead. So yeah, like with the mentor stuff or like the friends you hang out with, it's super important.
Who do you draw inspiration from? Whether that's someone you know personally, someone you see online, social media, where do you go for inspiration? Who are those people?
There's probably different like categories of inspiration, I guess. The quickest way to get me into like get me in my feels and like harp on like my passion is like seeing the dude like Michael Block was this guy that just a club pro that just competed in the PGA Championship recently, and like seeing someone like that, like complete underdog, like his day job is at a golf course and he's like competing with these high-level professionals at one of the biggest tournaments in the world. Like, I love that story because I think it parallels, like, my stuff. Like, obviously not to the same degree, but just, like, the dude that's not supposed to be there, that's getting his shot, kind of. I like that. But just day-to-day stuff, I'm maybe not necessarily like inspired personally, but it makes me feel hopeful for like the world at large. These dudes that are like coming to treatment, honestly, and like seeing that people are like capturing that lightning in a bottle that I had, and like starting that, because I spoke about what a big thing that was for me to ask for help.
Yeah.
So I relate to that, and it shit's hard. So like I'm happy. It fills me up when I see that, and that's why I do what I do too. And then between you, Shaylin, and like Corbin, and like our like close people around us that have like go through some shit, and for the most part are on the other side of it, like building off of it. It's never going to be LeBron James for me, or like Jocko. That's not where my personal brand of inspiration comes from. So yeah, more of the common person that's like really doing the stuff.
Yeah.
Not for the gram, if you will.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, now we got some fun questions ahead.
Oh boy.
First one. You're walking out tonight for the heavyweight champion of the world, UFC. What is your fight song?
So we've talked about this a little bit, and I go back and forth because you know me, I like to break it down, like what's the circumstance, what's the fight, that kind of thing. But I think what I always come back to is like I'm a Soldier by Pac. Like, it's the hardest way you can come out.
Right.
Yeah, that's got to be it for me. I could give some better like secondary options and stuff, but it's that for sure.
You can never go
Cue
wrong
that
with
right
Tupac.
now. Yeah.
What role would you say that fitness played with your mental health and your recovery?
Man, it was big. So, there is the mind, body, spirit approach to not just getting sober, but just to like being well in life. So I know that's real already, but I think it gets overlooked when we're talking about like getting sober. But just like you, you had your experience with it. Same for me. It's been huge for me for a lot of different reasons. When I came into treatment, I had beaten my body up really bad. I had some stuff that I feared would be lasting even after I got sober long term. Luckily, most of it's resolved itself, but, I got all this, like, world-class, like, clinical therapy and dudes that, could quote the big book front and back, and, like, I soaked all that up. But then, when I get out of treatment, it's like I know all this great stuff about myself, about recovery, but I still have these open track marks on my arm. Like, I still have heart palpitations from when I was bleeding from my eyeballs. Like, I need to address this with the same intensity that I did the other stuff. And it was good at doing that part of it for me, but then it had the byproduct of like, oh, I'm still a junkie up here. So like, I need to place this energy somewhere. And there's no better thing I could have done than like, okay, I've never done a triathlon. Like, let's see what that's about. I've never been a runner. But it seems like it'd be hard and it would kind of scratch that itch. So on so many different levels, it's been super impactful, and it's a part of my day still.
So to give a little bit of context to this next question, Lance is probably the best golfer I've ever come in contact with. I've seen a lot of them. I've been around golf a little bit. I don't play myself, but I told this story earlier. I'll tell it again, but we were at a work event where we went to Top Golf, and I thought I had seen some really good people swing clubs, and I was sitting there talking to everybody, and Lance came up to hit, and I turned around for a minute to say something to somebody, and when this dude swung the club, I have never heard a sound like this in my life. I've never heard the violence of the club hitting the ball like I had heard it. It's like one of those moments where you turn around and you realize, like, oh, like, he's different. Like, there's levels to this shit. And so, Lance, very good golfer. So, if you had to, I already know your answer. I shouldn't even ask this question, but if you had to pick, you only can do one for the rest of your life.
Okay.
The gym or golf?
Yeah, it's golf.
Gotta be golf?
Yeah, it's gotta be.
I knew that was an easy one.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So where did your, not to go too deep in the weeds, but where did your golf stuff start? When did you first pick up a club, and then where did it go?
Man, so it's equally like traumatic and like a thing that stayed with me. So when my mom got remarried, when I want to say 7, he was a golfer. That was kind of his thing, and so naturally, like, father figure you want to be a part of. I kind of started riding around with him. I got a club, and he just said, yeah, start hitting some balls. And so it was a weird circumstance, but it worked out. Like, he got hurt at work and was unable to work. So what he did, he turned all that work time into taking me to play golf, teaching me to play golf. And like the dad aspect was great. Like, he was the one, like, we can talk shit about mom, and it's just between the boys.
Right.
So that's where it started.
Did you already have like natural talent to golf, and then he just like polished it?
I had never touched a golf club. I was football, soccer, baseball, just being a kid that was, athletically gifted on some levels. And so it translated, but it was the thing that it was very difficult. And like, I was like, I can run faster than that kid. I can throw a baseball farther than that guy. But this is just the golf course sitting in front of me, and I got to go do it well. So that intrigued me, and it's a solitary sport. There's nobody to blame. Like, if you're, you get off the rails, and I like that, like, taking on that personal aspect to it versus like a team or.
Right.
But yeah, I bear down on it, and I mean, I got to a point where it's like 10, 12 hours a day at the golf course, which led me to like a fast track of did well in junior golf, high school golf, got scholarship offers and stuff. At some point in there, my mom and him got divorced, which was a big blow for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it trickled into, like, he was the one that was taking me to tournaments. He was the one to tell me to, like, your friends are fucking up. Like, come to the golf course with me. Mm. So I do feel like that was a really critical exit by him at a time when things were bubbling on some different fronts. Because he would straight up, like, hey, those dudes are not where it's at. Let's go to the golf course.
Right.
So obviously option B, where like he's out of the picture and I do go with the friends who aren't where it's at. Yeah. That was how it played out. But, I went to Ole Miss and, was attempting to just walk on up there. I got kicked out of school like the first semester up there. But even when I was going to meet the coach during my campus visit, I took a bunch of ecstasy before I went to meet the coach. Like that's where I was at with it, But yeah, I played some mini tour stuff, done some Monday qualifiers on the PGA Tour, and my most current, I got into the sober thing and doing other stuff. Life happens. But my most current goal with it is shooting for next year's U.S. Open qualifier. And in the meantime, obviously, like, brushing up on some stuff and like getting back to it. But I want to put that into the universe because I say it all the time. I told Shaylin, like, that's kind of what I'm aiming at. Corbin, of course. But now it's like on record, so I'm held to it. The next episode you will check in on how the U.S. Open qualifier went.
Let's go.
Yeah.
You reminded me of a story, one college visit I did. I was for basketball, and I go up there, and one of my buddies went to the college. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to spend the night in his dorm room, and then I'll go meet the coach next in the morning.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm so excited that I'm, like, going to basically sit down and talk with the coach, and they're going to watch my senior year and all that stuff. And so then I think it's a good idea to get obliterated drunk and snort coke all night, not sleep.
You got to.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so I go looking crazy, I'm sure, to meet this coach. And he just wants to like sit there and shoot the shit. And so he starts throwing me the ball, telling me to shoot. And so I'm shooting threes. And I think I had bricked the first two. And he's like, oh, I had heard you were a shooter. And it just pissed me off that he thought I wasn't.
Yeah.
And so then I just like went on this run. And then I was the biggest asshole ever because he had like pissed me off and basically pissed my only opportunity away.
Yeah.
Just because he doubted me for a second when I come
like,
in looking,
who I am.
hungover and strung out on coke.
Yeah.
So me and you vibe out on the hip hop shit all the time.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, who is your top 5 alive?
Alive. I mean,
It could be your favorite, not who you feel's best, but who's your top 5 alive favorite?
So I got to put Jay in there. He doesn't get the respect. I mean, he does kind of on like lists and stuff, but like people don't. You know, I'm a huge Jay-Z dude.
Yeah.
And like
Next level catalog.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, he's on there. I won't do it in numbers. I'll just do hypotheticals.
Everybody puts their own twist on this question.
Yeah. So I mean, it's got to be. So him. I mean, Benny, even, you know, he's new, but like you can't deny it.
If it's your favorite, it's your favorite.
So this probably hasn't been listed yet, but Big Crit, Mississippi boy, right up the street, like he does not get the shine he deserves. I mean, I guess you got to throw Nas in there, right? Like that's up there.
Are we really gonna leave Freddie off this list?
So I don't know. He's like, is he the Sixth Man Award, or is he on the actual list?
I thought I knew you. Who is this guy?
I mean, I think so. It's so hard, but yeah, Freddie's.
No,
on
don't
there.
go with Freddie. You weren't gonna go with Freddie. Don't go
so
with him now.
Freddie. So I was on the fence about like.
Now we're getting to the real part of the podcast.
Yeah. So. Yeah. It's got to be. Yeah, it's Freddie.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel good about that.
All right. So,
but Big Crit, like, you need to tell people he's on the list. He should be on your list. I've never heard you talk about him, but lyrically, like.
I mean, he's cool. I just don't hear much shit from him.
I know.
When's the last time you put something out?
He's too good to make music. It just wouldn't be fair for anyone else. Yeah.
All right. I got a couple words for you. I just want you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind.
Oh boy.
All right. Loyalty.
Necessary.
John Daly.
Legend.
Brother, I've never seen a clip of him that I don't love.
Oh, he's the greatest.
He's so anti everything.
He is. If you went and got a dude off like a construction site, personality wise, like that's, and you give him $60 million, like he's what happens.
Right. What's his shit? Cokes, or isn't it?
Yeah, he'll drink like 18 Diet Cokes and a round of golf, like 4 packs of cigs. But he was a big gambler. Like, yeah, so if we go down the golf rabbit hole a little bit, he won the PGA Championship we were talking about. He won that by being the 9th alternate. No one knew who this dude was. In the 1 through 8th alternates, it was like one guy's wife went into labor. One guy missed his plane from wherever. One guy stubbed his toe, whatever the deal is. Anyway, he was 9th on that list, and all these things played out to where his 9th alternate space became the first alternate, and he got in the tournament, and he won, just being a complete nobody. So, like, the other guy I was telling you about, like, that's the inspiration.
Right.
Tiger's the GOAT forever and always, but, like, that's the guy that I relate to.
Right.
But, yeah, he's a legend.
Big Tex.
Ooh. Genesis? Like, that's, for me, that's kind of like where, not necessarily like where everything started, but with you and I, like where it was like, it became more of, you know, what our friendship is. Like, a lot of I mean, listening to Nickelback because the night shift person had like left on the radio,
Right.
or they hadn't restarted the playlist, so it's deathly quiet. But yeah, I think that's where we got to know each other, but also where on the fitness level, like we played around with a lot of stuff and like crafted a lot of stuff in that realm too. And yeah, I mean, it just doubled down on like the standard we set with each other.
Dude, shout out to Big Tex. It's
Yeah.
it's House of Gains and Big Tex are definitely I mean, it's not even in Austin, but to me, Big Tex is like the Mecca in Austin. And for us to go in there and spend countless hours each morning and stuff like that, the amount of stuff that we learned and taught each other and stuff like that, and really like cut our teeth in the gym. The people I work with every day in training and stuff like that, I tell them like identify a couple people, whether it's social media or YouTube, whatever it is, that are educated and learn from them. But there's so much that could be said for going in there and figuring it out yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think about like when we started to where we ended up doing an exercise, and it's like the amount that we learned in there has just been invaluable.
Yeah, it's
and the coolest, some of the coolest people ever.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I haven't. We've tried at different places since like you moved down south in Austin. Now I'm in Houston. I haven't been anywhere that like matched, for lack of a better word, the vibes.
The vibe.
Like big vibe place.
I need some character in my gym. I want ripped seats, rusty fucking weights.
Yeah. Nah. Shout out Big Tex for sure.
Family.
Complicated? Probably.
Right. Joe Biden.
Hopefully my word can be memory. Like a distant one to come. Yeah.
Right. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Donald Trump?
Man, I'm not like, I don't feel good about any of them in general.
Right.
But I mean,
he's fucking funny though.
Oh yeah, we at least get the entertainment.
Yeah. It's widely known that you have some of the worst taste when it comes to shows and movies.
Oh wow.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think
widely known in the Livingston household.
Anybody that says it's not House of Dragons, what is it?
Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Anybody that says Game of Thrones is not a good show is just
that was one of the worst like I don't know, conspiracies perpetrated on the public at large that like they just told you the show was good. Everybody subtly just to themselves like, man, this show's not good, but everyone says it is, so I want to be a part of that. It's just not good.
It's such a wild statement.
But I'll get back to you on maybe some new shows will come back next time.
What would you say is your top 3 favorite movies of all time?
I mean, Departed. Up there.
Us Irish folk don't have many gangster films, so we got to cling to that one.
Yeah. While like a Casino is kind of old and played out, like it is like the standard for that type of movie. The Town. They're like I said, they're all. It's very easy to peg my shit when it comes to movies.
So what nowadays? What are you working on? What are you up to? Who are you affiliated with, Lance?
I am affiliated with the Last Resort Recovery Center, which happens to be the place I got sober. So outside of, I've only been working there in an official capacity for the past year. So, I mean, outside of that, I've been, since the day I left treatment, like, I'm coming back, like, that's my place. That's home. I work in admissions there, so I'm fielding the calls of the dude that's ready to go to treatment. More often than not, it's the dude that's not ready to go to treatment, and having those conversations, some of which we've had here, of saying the things I wish somebody had said to me a long time before I came to that realization on my own. So, like, if anyone's going through it, either them or their parents are going to be calling me, and I'm going to do whatever I can to eliminate all barriers for them to get to treatment. And it's easy to do when it's a place like Last Resort, and I know what kind of good work they do, and I feel good about, like, come to us, like, we can help you.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, there's definitely some less than genuine or in it for the right reasons type of people in the industry that is like the recovery industry. We've had experience working with some of that. Luckily, we've moved on to being able to actually help people in a good capacity. But yeah, man, I put my name and my life behind the Last Resort as far as the help that they offered me and the help that they offer people every single day. So if anybody is struggling, definitely look up the Last Resort Recovery Center. We're just outside of Austin. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Right.
And call me when you're ready to.
Yeah. So one thing we like to do on the show to wrap up is this podcast is called the I Am Redemption podcast. That's not saying I am redemption, but that's everybody, like all inclusive. If you've been through the shit and you came out on the other side, you are redemption. So who is Lance?
I am unique. I am strong. I am disciplined. And